December 27, 1953. With 4 minutes left, the Lions are almost out of hope until a gravel-voiced quarterback with no face mask steps into the huddle and growls, "Just block, boys, and old Bobby will take you to the championship." That was Bobby Layne, the NFL's original gambler, the man who shattered records after losing his father at age 5, who turned wild nights and broken bones into 3 titles and the first dynasty of modern football. In a sport now dominated by $50 million contracts and ironclad rules, there will never be another Bobby Layne. Why did one quarterback bend an entire era around his will? And why is what he built now impossible? Bobby Layne. Born 1926, Santa Ana, Texas. His father was gone before Bobby turned 6, leaving a boy who learned early that nothing was promised. Dallas became home, but Layne never really belonged to any one place. He found his people on the field. At Highland Park High, he met Doak Walker, a running back as smooth as Layne was wild. The two were opposites, but together, they made Friday nights in Texas feel like the center of the universe. Layne threw passes like he was daring the world to stop him. By 17, he was already a legend in Dallas, calling his own plays, breaking his own rules. Coaches tried to rein him in. They couldn't. He and Doak would sneak out after practice, racing each other down empty streets, betting sodas on who could outrun the police whistle. It was friendship sharpened by rivalry, and neither boy ever forgot it. College called next. Layne chose Texas, and from the first snap, he owned the huddle. He started as a freshman in 1944, wartime football, half the roster already gone to Europe. Layne didn't flinch. He played with a kind of reckless authority, running the Longhorn offense like it was a backyard brawl. In the 1946 Cotton Bowl, he put on a show for the ages. 6 touchdowns, passing, running, improvising, dragging the team back every time Missouri thought they had him. 11 of 12 passes completed. The Longhorns scored 40 points. Layne accounted for everyone. His numbers were staggering, but it was the attitude that set him apart. Teammates watched him walk into the locker room after a loss and laugh, promising they'd never lose the same way twice. He pitched no-hitters for the Texas baseball team in spring, then turned around and broke football records in the fall. Coaches called him the best pure competitor they'd ever seen. Doak Walker, now a rival at SMU, said Layne could beat you with his arm, his legs, or his mouth. He just refused to be ordinary. By the time the pros came calling, Layne had already built a reputation for impossible comebacks and a stubborn refusal to quit. The boy from Santa Ana, fatherless, fearless, and always looking for the next game, was ready for a league that had never seen anything like him. Detroit in the 1950s was a city on overdrive. The factories never slept, and neither did the people who built the cars that drove America. By day, the air was thick with the rumble of assembly lines and the promise of overtime pay. By night, the bars and bowling alleys filled with workers who poured their sweat into Fords and Chevys. This was a city that believed in muscle, grit, and the idea that anything could be fixed with the right wrench. Football fit right in. The Lions played like the city lived, fast, tough, and a little bit reckless. The NFL of that era was a world apart from what it would become. No salary cap, no player unions, no agents whispering in the background. Contracts were simple. Most players worked second jobs in the offseason. There were no private jets, no million-dollar endorsement deals. The closest thing to a corporate sponsor was the local car dealership offering a free test drive. Quarterbacks called their own plays, reading the defense with a glance and a gut feeling. Coaches trusted them to run the show, and sometimes to invent it on the fly. Television was just starting to find football. In living rooms across the Midwest, families huddled around black and white sets, watching grainy images flicker from Briggs Stadium. There were no instant replays, no talking heads dissecting every decision. If you wanted to know what happened, you listened to the radio, or you asked the guys at the bar. Players walked among fans after the game. They drank with them, argued with them. sometimes even fought with them. The line between hero and neighbor was thin. Detroit's rise as an industrial powerhouse shaped the team's identity. The Lions belong to the city in a way that feels impossible now. Fans packed the stands in snow and sleet, cheering for men who lived down the street. The locker room was a closed world, its own set of rules. Outsiders didn't ask questions, and insiders didn't give answers. It was a league of secrets, grudges, and quiet deals. And in this wild, unregulated league, a quarterback like Bobby Layne could thrive. He didn't need permission. He needed a ball, a huddle, and a little chaos. The city gave him all three. The Chicago Bears took Bobby Layne 3rd overall in the 1948 draft. George Hollis wanted a winner, but he didn't want Layne running the show. He barely saw the field, stuck behind Sid Luckman and Johnny Lujack. One season, then a trade to the New York Bulldogs, a team in name only. The Bulldogs finished with 1 win, 10 losses, and 1 tie. Layne threw for more interceptions than touchdowns. The stands were half empty, the locker room colder than the field. He called it the longest year of his life. Even then, he refused to quit. He played every snap like it counted for something. Detroit called in 1950. The Lions needed a spark. Layne needed a second chance. He walked into the locker room and found Doak Walker waiting. Old friends, reunited. The city didn't know it yet, but its football team had just changed forever. Layne took over the huddle, calling plays with a gambler's grin. He threw deep when the defense expected a run. He ran when everyone else would have punted. The Lions started to believe. By 1952, Detroit was chasing a title. The Browns stood in their way. Paul Brown's machine, the kings of the league. In the championship game, Layne ran for a touchdown, then kept the offense moving. The defense did its part, and when the final whistle blew, it was 17-7, Detroit. The city exploded. Layne and Walker carried the trophy through the streets, the crowd chanting their names. For the first time since 1935, the Lions were champions. Layne didn't win with stats. He won with nerve. In 3 years, he'd gone from cast-off to champion. Teammates swore he could see the future. He'd stand in the huddle, mud on his jersey, and tell them exactly how the next drive would end. And then he'd do it. The city saw itself in him. Tough, stubborn, impossible to discourage. Detroit was a town that fixed its own problems. Now it had a quarterback who did the same. The league took notice. Layne's Lions weren't pretty, but they were winners. He'd come through the worst the league could throw at him and come out on top. The boy from Texas, the cast-off from New York, was now the king of Detroit. And he was just getting started. December 8th, 1957. Bobby Layne, Detroit's iron quarterback, took a hit in the second quarter against the Browns. He tried to stand, then crumpled. His right ankle snapped in 3 places. Doctors ruled him out for the season before the swelling had even gone down. The news hit Detroit like a punch to the gut. Layne, the man who never missed a game, was done. The Lions were left with a backup, Tobin Rote, and a city holding its breath. But the team didn't fold. They rallied. Rote stepped in, and the Lions tore through the playoffs. The championship game wasn't close. Detroit hammered Cleveland, 59-14. Layne watched from the sideline, bundled in a coat, crutches under one arm, a championship ring waiting on the other. He never took a snap, but every player in that locker room said the win belonged to him as much as anyone. His voice was in every huddle. His attitude was everywhere on the field. Layne's legend wasn't built on perfect health or textbook mechanics. It was built on grit, improvisation, and a kind of tactical recklessness that left defenses gasping. He called his own plays, read defenses like a gambler reading a deck, and when the clock was running out, he sped everything up. No one in the league ran a hurry-up offense with more nerve. He'd bark out signals, skip the huddle, and force the defense to scramble. The playbook called it improvisation. Today, they call it the 2-minute drill. There's no official record naming Layne as the inventor of the 2-minute offense. But watch the old game film, and there he is, waving receivers into motion, ignoring sideline instructions, stringing together passes with the clock ticking down. Opposing coaches started scripting special defenses just to slow him in the final minutes. Ernie Stautner, a Hall of Fame lineman, said he never believed he could be beat. Layne played without a face mask, long after most quarterbacks covered up. He claimed it gave him a better view of the field. Maybe it was true. Or maybe he just wanted defenders to see his face, to know he wasn't afraid. He looked like a throwback even in his own time. Mud on his jersey, a grin under his battered helmet, daring the world to try him. Detroit's 1957 title was a team victory, but it was also a tribute to the culture Layne had built. He didn't have to play in the game to leave his mark on it. The Lions played fast, loose, and fearless, just like their quarterback had taught them. After the trophy was handed out, Layne hobbled onto the field, crutches and all, and slipped the championship ring onto his finger. Pain and victory, inseparable. That was Bobby Layne. Alex Karras, rookie defensive tackle, future Hall of Famer, and, for one wild Detroit summer, Bobby Layne's designated drinking companion. The job wasn't on any official roster, but everyone in the Lions front office knew why Karras was hired to keep Layne company after hours. It was damage control, team chemistry, and survival all rolled into one. If Layne was going out, Karras was going with him. The logic was simple: keep the quarterback happy, keep the team together. Training camp, 1958. Layne and Karras barreled down Michigan highways in a blue Buick, windows down, Bobby halfway out the passenger side, belting out country songs at 80 miles an hour. Karras at the wheel, Layne waving a bottle, both men laughing into the wind. The police stopped them twice that month. Curfew meant nothing. Fines piled up. The coaches grumbled, but nobody benched the quarterback who brought home championships. The team accountant once joked that the bar tab was bigger than the playbook. Inside Detroit's Lindell AC, Layne held court. One night, he bought drinks for the whole bar, 100 strangers, 100 friends. Karras tried to keep up, but by dawn, he was under the table, and Layne was still telling stories. Teammates drifted in and out, drawn by the gravity of Layne's presence. Arguments, laughter, secrets. This was where the Lions became more than a team. On Mondays, the hangovers were legendary. On Sundays, so was the focus. Layne would show up to practice with 2 hours of sleep and run the offense like nothing happened. Karras later said, "I was drunk all the time, but somehow made the team." For outsiders, it looked like chaos. For the Lions, it was a kind of ritual. Layne's wild nights weren't just about excess. They were about trust. Every player knew that if Bobby could lead them through the darkness, he could lead them anywhere. The city loved him for it. The front office tolerated it. In a league that was already starting to change, the Lions held on to their quarterback and his barroom brotherhood for as long as they could. October 6th, 1958. Detroit traded Bobby Layne to Pittsburgh for Earl Morrall and 2 draft picks. The city was stunned. 3 championships in 6 years, and their quarterback, the heart of the team, was gone overnight. Layne packed his bags, said goodbye to the locker room he'd built, and headed east. In Pittsburgh, he reunited with Buddy Parker, the coach who'd trusted him most. Layne wore black and gold now, but the edge never dulled. Over 4 seasons, he led the Steelers to 27 wins, 22 losses, and 2 ties. No playoff runs, no more titles, but he gave the franchise a swagger it had never known. The old magic flickered, but the days of Detroit glory were over. Back in Michigan, fans searched for answers. The Lions made the playoffs just once in the next 60 years. Losses piled up, coaches came and went, and every Thanksgiving, the old stories grew louder. Somewhere along the way, a new legend took root: the curse of Bobby Layne. Supposedly, as he left town, Layne declared the Lions wouldn't win for 50 years. The line became gospel, printed in columns, whispered in bars, passed from father to son. But there's no record Layne ever said it. The first time the curse appeared in print was 2001, when Detroit news writer Jerry Green admitted he'd invented the line as local folklore. Still, the myth stuck. It gave fans something to blame, a reason for the heartbreak that never seemed to end. Today, the idea of another Bobby Layne feels impossible. Quarterbacks sign $50 million contracts. There are cameras in every hallway, sponsors on every sleeve, and social media waiting to pounce on every mistake. Executives say a player with Layne's habits wouldn't last a month. The game is systematized, sanitized, and under constant surveillance. Layne played in a world where chaos was part of the job description, not a liability. That world is gone. What's left is the legend. A quarterback who lived as hard as he played, whose shadow still falls over a city waiting for another miracle. On December 27, 1953, Bobby Layne led the Detroit Lions on an 80-yard drive to win the NFL championship, a moment grounded in official game footage and press accounts. Over his career, Layne won 3 NFL titles, set every major passing record of his era, and is credited by many historians with inventing the 2-minute drill. Despite his legendary achievements, the true reasons behind his shocking 1958 trade to Pittsburgh remain debated in team documents and interviews. The so-called curse of Bobby Layne is confirmed by journalists as a myth that emerged decades later, not a documented event. Today's NFL, with $50 million contracts, constant media scrutiny, and strict conduct rules, offers no place for a player like Layne. His story shows that greatness can thrive in chaos, but also that eras change. As the evidence stands, Bobby Layne remains unmatched, his legend rooted in fact, not folklore.